Hi, I'm Bella Bauer, and welcome to the Purple Project, where we feature stories about people living and thriving with a diagnosis of epilepsy. Today, I'm joined by News Nation writer and former anchor and investigative reporter Rich Bodee. Rich, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
I want to start with your epilepsy diagnosis. Tell us about it and what that process looked like.
Yeah, my story was a bit atypical. I had cancer. Thankfully, I survived, but one of the side effects was seizures.
Mhm.
Um, Before that epilepsy diagnosis, though, there was this long, arduous process filled with lots of tests. And mine took longer than most, of course, because after cancer, you have to rule out a resurgence and other illnesses. But I do hope someday in the future, epilepsy can be diagnosed faster.
That's incredible. Okay. When were you diagnosed and were you scared?
I don't know about scared. I was more surprised because I didn't know anything about epilepsy.
Mhm.
I didn't know what it meant for the immediacy. I didn't know what it meant for my future. But interestingly enough, there was also this sense of peace. And I know that sounds weird, but it just explained a lot.
Yeah.
And I was also so happy to be done with the vast majority of testing.
How did you adapt to having epilepsy and what does that look like in your daily life?
I don't know if you ever truly adapt. You basically just find different lifestyle approaches. I mean, the ingredients are all there of, getting enough sleep, eating healthy, exercise, those all apply. But
Mhm.
there's still a piece of you, I think, that is uncomfortable. And you kind of just have to learn to be okay with that. So adapting is different for everyone. And I think the hardest part of the process is figuring that out for yourself.
I agree completely. Did you find community or resources, and was that difficult to do?
Yeah, I found communities on social media. Really wasn't that difficult at all. Facebook
Mhm.
has groups on YouTube and Instagram. I watched videos and followed other people's stories. I've read medical papers. I wanted to know everything I could about this
Mhm.
condition, and I wanted to know about what other people experienced. So I learned a lot very quickly. Now, there's a certain negative connotation among the public about social media in general. But as a journalist, while I recognize and see those concerns,
Mhm.
I've also found it's a great place to build connections, see different perspectives, especially when it comes to something like this.
Yeah,
And even if you
absolutely.
don't post or talk about your experience at all, sometimes it feels good to just see yourself in others.
Yeah, to have that sense of knowing that you're not alone in that diagnosis. Did you believe that there is a stigma still associated with people with epilepsy? And do you think that there's ways to change that?
Oh, yes. I think that there's a stigma around epilepsy. Personally, I think it stems from a lack of knowledge, and that's really across the board. So prior to News Nation, when I was a local anchor and reporter, I interviewed neurologists for stories about epilepsy, and I was told this: we don't fully understand the mechanism with which a seizure occurs.
Mhm.
Hearing that was concerning to me. You know, Epilepsy research, the long-term impacts of having cancer, programs like those are so often underfunded.
Mhm.
Um, I'd really like to see more of them too. So, forget doctors for a second. I think the void creates too much room for speculation, especially for people who are unfamiliar or even slightly unfamiliar with the condition itself.
Mhm.
Now, I do think there's ways to reduce the stigma. For one, fund epilepsy research.
Yeah.
I think it's crucial that we understand, um, you know, those mechanisms to better protect people. Secondly, I think you have to have access to information. So, do people use medical IDs? I set mine up on my phone. I'd like to know if EMTs use that information.
Mhm.
In my research, not always the case, unfortunately. I think it's important to utilize that information, especially in an emergency. You've, of course, done a great job of spotlighting epilepsy and teaching seizure safety. When I was in high school, it's funny because that we're even talking about this, because when I was in high school, we learned CPR in health class.
Mhm.
Thankfully, I've never had to use it, but
Yeah.
I'm glad I know it just in
Mhm.
case. So why not teach seizure safety, how to recognize a seizure, or that there are different types of seizures besides the ones that we all see in movies, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So I think if someone teaches one class, it could save someone's life. And I think it needs
Absolutely.
to be a part of the curriculum because you just never know when or where a seizure could happen.
Yes.
Instead, though, too often we read about people who are misdiagnosed, sometimes more than once, or we read about preventable tragedies. So I don't know what it's going to take for all school districts across the country to implement something like this for students. We're talking about 1 day of one class of training. That
Yeah.
would be the easiest, immediate first step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's as simple as that, is getting that started and really making sure that takes a hold into our future and the kids in schools. And my final question would be, what advice would you give to someone who is diagnosed with epilepsy?
I would say that there's no textbook for processing it. And telling people that you have epilepsy is something that I think can be very personal. At the same time, though, it's tough because I don't want to presume to know how someone's epilepsy impacts them daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever. So I think it comes down to just words of encouragement. And the fact is, you only get one chance at life. So I would tell them not to give up on their dreams. Too often, that stigma that we just talked about creates this idea of you can't.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who will tell you you can't if you have no condition. So you might as well just build a future that makes you happy. A while back, I set out with two dreams. One was to play college basketball, which was an awesome experience. And the other was to be a journalist. So, I don't know what the future holds, but I have no plans to stop climbing that ladder.
Absolutely. You're an incredible living example.
Oh, thank you.
And incredible advice. So thank you so much for joining me. And it was very exciting getting to talk to you today. I wanted to share a little bit about what I've been doing. For the past 2 years, I've been working with Indiana legislation, trying to get a seizure safety bill passed into a law, getting schools to understand that they need to train their teachers, train their staff so that they can help in the situation where a seizure occurs at school in order to save a life possibly someday. I think that's so important, and I'm so glad you touched on that and brought that up. I think it's something that's not talked about enough, and that's what I've been trying to do with my advocacy and awareness, and I think it's incredible that you're able to speak on that as well. And of course, I would love to feature as many more warriors as possible for you to be able to share your stories and cultivate those connections in our community. And I would love for you to submit your name and story at the Purple Project, my website on GoDaddyWebsites.com, or at thepurpleproject@myyahoo.com. You can email me. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you next time on the Purple Project.